Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my studio.
Today we resume the painting of this 3D printed miniature. This miniature is from Ghamak Miniatures. Do check them out at Patreon. By the way, I'll put the painting or the part 1 of the painting of this model below. I painted this model 3 months ago and it took me a while to go back and work on the model because it came without a base. This channel is supported by these awesome brands. I finally found a perfect piece of plastic that would serve as a good size base for this model. Thus, I decided to resume and finish the painting of this miniature. This Ghamak miniature is so complex and complicated already. It has so many details, but I decided to add some skulls on the basing to show a sense of scale or as a scale reference for the model. After gluing and priming the skulls, we are ready to paint. We are using the red grass wet palette, but I decided to use the non-washable or non-reusable palette paper, which was sort of a bad move in my opinion, but I'll share with you later in the video why. We are doing glaring in most of the painting of this model. Basically, glaring is just glaze layering. So instead of adding water to the paints, I add mediums. In this case, a thinner medium, a part of thinner medium. So I thinned most of the paint around 3 parts paint and 1 part thinner medium. You might get confused with the graphics because sometimes I use the 3 parts paint and 1 part water graphics, which is the usual way of thinning base colors. Anyways, I'll put a ton of links of previous videos explaining how I paint miniatures and the basic of painting miniatures, especially with mediums. It took me 3 friggin' days to finish this model. Usually I finish a model, a small miniature, in around a day, maybe 6, even less than 6 hours. And then I edit at night and then I have a YouTube video. But with this one, it took me 3 days, 3 full days to finish the model. To be honest, I think I could have finished this in 2 days if I re-primed the model and painted from the base color, from primer, base color, and highlights. But when I resumed painting of the model, I kinda like a more vibrant look to the model. Thus, the part 1 painting does not really apply to the look that I want or the final look that I wanted. So originally I wanted a toned down green monster, and thus part 1 shows like a toned down green miniature. And the painting is kinda nice in part 1, but it's so far from the look that I wanted for this one after resuming. So if you will notice here in the video, I'm kinda adding more highlights, or I'm kinda making the overall colors of the model in day 1 and making it more vibrant. I'm using lime green on the skin, painted a ton of pimples, and also we're going to highlight the gum parts and the tongue. Basically, I wanted a more vibrant look, so basically I kinda repainted the whole model in day 1. So now you notice because we have a darker base color, I'm kinda doing glaring but applying the paint via stippling, especially on areas that are kinda big, so that I create a sort of texture and a nice stippling texture on the skin and some large areas of the model. Stippling is actually the best cheat code or the best way to paint skin if you don't want to blend too much. because it kind of creates a nice texture. At the same time, you're like blending or layering lighter colors on top of each other, but you're not really focused on the blending of these colors because you're stippling. So you create a nice transition of colors without actually blending the paints. Stippling is actually just layering, although the method of applying the paint is via stippling. So the technique is layering, but the method of application is stippling. The same way, actually, everything is like layering. Because dry brushing, I apply it like it's layering too. I apply darker mid-tones and then highlights with via dry brushing. So dry brushing is like the method of application, and the technique is also layering. Oh, I haven't said this in my previous videos, but to be honest, glazing, in my opinion, is also layering. It's layering of transparent paints. So everything is layering because layering is like the application of paints on of layers of paints on top of each other. So everything is layering in my opinion. Okay. So now we're going back to the usual terminologies. Notice that I don't call them standards because there are no standards in art, again, in my opinion, but we're going to use the usual terminologies again. I'm just sharing my thoughts. I don't want to get comments again of confusing like first time painters or new painters in the hobby by inventing new names. Now back to this Ghamak miniature painting. So basically, you'll notice in the video that it's all glaring or glaze layering, and I'm applying the paints via stippling sometimes or sometimes via really like swift strokes so that I create scratches, especially at the latter part of the video. So day one was spent to like improve the contrast of the model, of the painting of the model. I added more highlights, I added more shades, and I kind of pushed the contrast of the whole painting with in day one. So in day one, I kind of finished the green skin and the gums and of course the pimples. At this point of painting the gums of the model, I was so itchy to use my airbrush to paint the highlights of the gums, but I decided not to. I was kind of frustrated after day one because I was like back from the start. I just have like nice base colors, but I'm so far from finishing. For day 2, I kinda decided to do a bit of shortcut. I did not want to do like complex layering of the skulls, of the leather parts, and like the chain parts, the metal parts or iron parts. So I decided to paint with just the basic base colors, and then from the base colors, I added highlights. To be honest, I thought I could finish this model in day 2, especially while painting the leather parts. Because painting leather is so easy. You just have to paint like in swift strokes. In my opinion, just use like lighter colors. I started with like darker brown and then orange brown and then light brown to paint the highlights. So it's a matter of just painting like scratch like brush strokes so that you create like an old leather look. And then if you want, you could apply a sepia wash on top of all your layering of the brown color so that you kind of like blend everything together or filter all of the browns together. After painting the base colors of the skulls with medium gray, I decided to paint the weapons with like a skin color. I decided that although I think it's really skin, but it's pale skin most likely, but I painted it with normal skin, reddish skin color, and I'm very happy with this decision. Although painting the weapons with skin color is kinda time consuming because you have to kinda blend the skin colors so that you have a convincing skin, and it was a bit time consuming, but I really love that decision because it made the whole Ghamak miniature look more gross and nasty. Also here in day 2, I'm kinda trying to speed up the painting of this miniature. So notice or take note of all the paints I'm using because these paints are extra opaque and are very nice as base colors. Now we paint the metal or iron parts, the chains and stuff. Were started with cold gray, which is my fab game color, and I have to have a video of my fab game color soon. I find painting NMM very easy, especially if they're not the main element of the model. Because for me personally, it's just like painting leather. It's like painting a darker base color and then you paint the highlights. And the more highlights you paint, the more convincing your NMM will look like. Now I wasn't happy with the deck tan base color of the teeth, so I decided to paint all of the teeth with silver gray. And imagine painting all these teeth for the second round. So day 1 was pimples, and now day 2 was painting all of these teeth. Now we are on day 3. And this is the reason why I kinda regret using the red grass disposable wet palette paper. Cause one, I'm a messy painter. I mean, I mix so messily on the wet palette paper. And two, the miniature is so big. So I should have realized that I should have used the washable wet palette paper from the start. However, sometimes I can't resist using the disposable wet palette paper because I feel it's more moist, especially now it's summer here in the Philippines and I like my wet palette to be a bit more moist than usual, and so I like using the disposable wet palette paper. Day 3 was spent on painting all of the highlights of all the elements in the miniature. Like more highlights on the chains, more highlights on the gums and skin, the green skin, and improve the overall look of the model. This is, in my opinion, very time consuming because the difference between a good model and a great painted, I'm not saying this is a great painted model, but the difference between a good, fairly good model and a better painted model is the amount of highlights and details and scratches that you add to the model. I'm no expert at painting miniature. It's only been a year since I started painting miniature seriously. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, but it's more of I feel that once you know all of the basics of applying paints to your miniature, and especially if you know your paints, it's a matter of how much time do you want to spend on painting a miniature. In my opinion, the difference between a good painted model or good painted miniature and a great painted miniature, I'm not saying this model, this Ghamak miniature is a great painted model or miniature by me, but what I'm saying is that the difference between a fairly good painted model and a really well done model is the amount of time you spent on adding more highlights, developing the contrast, and improving the blending and stuff like that. So it's a matter of spending more time with the miniature, and that's pushing your patience level to your limit because that's the only reason. If you already know all of the basics of painting, you're the only hurdle to make the painting of the miniature better is your patience level. By the way, notice how differently I apply the highlights. For the leather parts and the iron parts, I apply in very swift linear strokes to like create or simulate scratches. And for the skulls and the skin, I apply the paints via stippling. Both are like layering in a way because I add glaze medium, oh no, thinner medium and paints, so I'm using semi-transparent paints but not watered down paints. So different strokes for different folks. Now it's about 3 p.m. of day 3 and I just need to add more effects paints. I'm using transparent red to improve like the swollen skin around the pimples, and also we're going to be using some effects paints. So after painting highlights and glazing with flow colors and transparent paints, we're using clear orange for the rust and blood effects or fresh blood from Game Effects. I practically use both these paints almost unthinned. I just add a bit of water before applying them to the model. So that's why the graphic is around 6 parts paint and 1 part water. It's important to note that I'm also using the rust effects and later the blood effects to like hide the imperfections of my painting. I paint them over areas where I did not blend the colors too well, or my highlights, the scratches and stuff like that are not looking good. So I use the effects paints to like hide the bad painting strokes that I applied, and thus giving a better overall look to the model. Simply put, I highly recommend that you apply effects paints right after you finish the model, even right after you've given it a nice matte varnish. That's it, Pansit! So before we wrap up this video, a ton of thanks to Ghamak Miniatures for this model. So this was the first miniature that I painted in 3 straight days, I think. It kind of pushed me to like my limit of my patience because I had to paint a ton of teeth and a ton of pimples. But I think it's all worth it. Even the pushing of contrast in day 1 was worth it because I felt I have to show my hands while showing you the painted model because I did not add contrast to this video clip, but the contrast of the painting of the miniature or the painted miniature is really nice. It looks fake. So now you could compare the contrast of the miniature with my tattoo, and my tattoo, the black ink of my tattoo is not totally black, meaning I did not add contrast to the video. The photo gallery of this model will be up at my Patreon. I'm sorry guys, I kinda reserve like the showing of the photo galleries to my patrons.
That's it, we're done. I hope you liked the video. Do like, comment, subscribe, and consider joining the channel so that you'll be part of our Discord community. Saludos!